Hi, this is Makoto and welcome to the Joy of d3.js. Today I'm going to talk about scaling. So far, when we render circles, the x and y value in the date was actual pixel size. So let's check this out. This 10 140. However, when you put your real data, such as billions of population in China as radius, the number does not fit into the browser size, so you have to convert into real relative size. d3.js has a lot of utilities for that. So here's today's topics. I first use scaling to decide color of each circle, then use it to replace radius, x, and y position with more realistic data, then render axis to visually display the size. So let's start. As usual, let's get a commit and start up the server. In the last commit, it was slightly harder to see the transition since they are all in black, so I allocated a unique color for each circle, and here's a commit diff. At line 25, I create a new function called color, and at line 34, when I specify field value, I pass a color function with ID as an argument. The color function almost works like dictionary of 20 colors, so that each ID gets color assigned accordingly. About the coloring, Ian Johnson did excellent tutorial, so you may want to watch his screencast as well as playing with his tributary example in the link. So here's a link. Okay, let's try the next commit. And refresh the browser. It's almost identical to the previous commit, except that the circles are bigger. Let's check their element. Their radius is 10 and 20. Let's look into the commit diff. In line 10 and 11, I put region and population attributes, and the population has 10,000 and 20,000 each. And in line, and so as like data 2, it has 30,000 and 15,000. In line 26, I created another function called radius. The syntax seems similar to the color function, but this time it changed to domain and range. Then at line 41, it calls radius function with d.population as the ID for the color. So what does domain and range do? Let's look back to the line 26. The domain takes an array with two values, 10,000 and 30,000, which is minimum and maximum population between line 10 and 14. So this is minimum and this is maximum. And the range function also takes an array with two values, 10 and 30. That's also the minimum and maximum size of radius I want to display. This blog post visualizing the relationship of domain and range nicely. So this is why it might be a bit difficult to see, but it says domain here, and this one says range here. So it's best to treat domain as an input range and a range as an output range, and the linear function is converting from input range to output range into a linear scale. if you look into d3.js documentation page, there are other scales such as power and log. Okay, let's try next commit. And start this up again. Now you can see the axis in both vertically and horizontally. Let's look into the commit depth. They do look quite a lot, but there's only a few new functions. So in line 24 and 25, it's setting transform attributes to translate by 50 pixels. I'll explain what does transform do in a minute, so let me skip for now. And in line 38, there is a scale function which is taking x function. You might think that we haven't defined any function called x. This is because I skipped a few commits between. Let's look into the whole code. Between line 29 and 36, x and y are defined exactly the same way as I defined color function. The scales x and y positions linearly, which are also reused in x-axis and y-axis. So this x-axis takes x as an argument of the scale function. And the x-axis is passed at line 51 as an argument of call function. By the way, call is a function that gets called once per selection, whereas each is a function that gets called per each selected element. Here is an example of each and call. So let's see. So this tributary code, if I do this, you can see that call is called once with like all the data elements, whereas each is called 3 times per element. Okay, now back to our sample code. You can look into browser what the x-axis function does by looking into the elements. So let's look. You can see that it generates G, which is a SVG element to group elements together, then line and text. There's one thing you have to be aware about axis. So let's go back to line 24 and 25 and removed these 2 lines. So if you refresh the browser, you can't see the axis anymore. However, if you look into elements, there are still axes. This is because the x and y axis are positioned outside of the browser window, so you have to move them. That's where transform attributes comes handy. Transform is not D3 API, it's part of SVG, so you can find more detail SVG document page, such as in Mozilla's one, this one. In our case, we use translate to move the position. You can also use something like rotate to rotate the entire SVG. And when you move the G element, all SVG elements within the G element move together. So this is also the SVG documentation about the G. So you don't have to put extra margin in X nor Y function to move circles together. The axes are not so difficult to understand, but writing all of them are very tedious. So what I personally do is to use editor snippet. I use TextMate and I created a TextMate bundle which you can download from GitHub. I've never tried, but TextMate bundle should be compatible with Sublime 2 text editor too. So let's try it out. So I create a new file and set the type to JavaScript. If I type access and type a tab, then it inserts the entire snippet. Okay, this is it for now, and thank you for watching.